You are now live.
So I'd like to call to order this October 25th meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. I'd like to establish the fact that we have a quorum. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Commissioner Austin, Commissioner Groenwegen, Commissioner Cardoza, Commissioner Edwards, Commissioner Carney, and myself, and eventually we hope to have the presence of Commissioner James, but we have a procedure that we have to go through before he can officially join the meeting. And so I will turn it over to our interim executive director, Sanford Berlin, to give us, to walk us through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier today, pursuant to Section 103-A of the Public Officers Law, the Commission staff conducted a hearing on a proposed resolution, Resolution 22-03, which, pursuant to Chapter 56 of the laws of 2022, which amended the Public Officers Law to permit remote participation by members of a public body, including the Commission, participation by video conferencing, specifically in our instance. The record in that hearing is now closed. We received no public comments either by email or through WebEx or in person during the course of the hearing. And so there is now before the Commission a proposed Resolution 2203, which has been posted on the Commission's website and has been circulated to members of the Commission present here today in Albany, as well as to Commissioner James by email. In addition, there is as called for by Section 103-A, a set of procedures which also were the subject of the public hearing today. Again, we received no comments either in person or on WebEx or by email with respect to those. And those provide the procedures pursuant to which video conferencing will be conducted in accordance with the provisions of the statute 103-A of the Public Officers Law. I would propose to the Chair and to the Commission that there be a motion to adopt Resolution 2203 as well thereafter as the procedures for member video conferencing in the case of extraordinary circumstances such as illness preventing attendance in person by a member of the Commission in circumstances where the public could not be invited into the video conferencing site being used.
Indeed. So is there first motion on the resolution to allow participation by remote participation by Commissioner Seymour James due to extraordinary circumstances involving
well, we should adopt the resolution in the first instance.
Yeah, so a motion to adopt that resolution.
So move.
That is Commissioner Cardoza, seconded by Commissioner Edwards. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting a resolution to allow this remote participation, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motion is carried. So now we have to adopt the rules for video conferencing. Is there a motion? Commissioner Edwards has moved. Is there a second? Vice Chair Austin has seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor then of adopting the rules for video conferencing that will allow Commissioner James to join the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Commissioner James, welcome to the meeting. And we hope you get better soon. But we appreciate the fact that even though you are very much under the weather, that you are taking the time to participate in this meeting. So thank you so much. You are muted, Commissioner James.
I think you have to unmute at your end. I don't think we have the ability.
There you are.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. All right. Before we get started with our business for the day, let me just say that I want to acknowledge a recent newspaper article concerning one of the members of the commission who will speak to you in just a second. And I want to reassure the public that all of us as commissioners of this New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government take very seriously the standards by which we should conduct ourselves. We are unequivocally committed to adhering both to the letter and the spirit of the law, rules, regulations that govern how we comport ourselves as commissioners. And I think you'll see us live up to that for the duration of the various tenures that we will have on this commission. I want to say that I think my new friend and colleague, because he is no longer a judge, having retired, and his exuberance and enthusiasm for supporting a friend at a campaign event for which he did not buy a ticket, but attended as the guest of his wife, had a slight lapse in judgment because of that enthusiasm and exuberance. And I will ask him to speak to you now, but I've appreciated the way in which he has expressed to us his feelings about this, and I will let him now share those with you, the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission and to the members of the public. I've learned a valuable lesson recently that our obligation is to not only be adherents to the law, but also the spirit of the law. And the transparency of this commission is so vitally important to make sure that we do follow that. So while anything to the contrary that I did not answer honestly on my application, or that I violated the law is incorrect. However, I did step over the line with regard to honoring the spirit of the law and in attending that fundraiser, even though I paid no money for it. An error that will never occur again, I assure you, and a lesson learned the hard way, which is sometimes the best lessons learned. So I thank you all for your courtesies and understanding, and let's go forward.
Thank you, Vice Chair Austin, and we will indeed go forward. And as I said, we will all make every effort to hold ourselves to the highest of standards, again, adhering to both the letter and the spirit of the laws and regulations that govern how we do business. So thank you. All right. Now to the business of the day. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October 6th meeting? Moved by Vice Chair Austin. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Cardoza. Are there any comments or questions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the October 6th public session, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Report from staff, and I'll turn it over to Executive Director Burley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under tab B is the operations update. The Commission has seen the figures for the current period and for year-to-date previously. At the request of commissioners at our last meeting, we have added to the operations report comparisons to comparable, more or less comparable period in 2021, as well as year-to-date in 2021. We had a start date for this year of July 8 for this commission, and so there's not a 100% correspondence between the two. But I think it does give you a comparative idea of how the commission has been performing from its inception as against a comparable period for the predecessor agency in the prior year. And we're happy to answer any questions. One thing I would point out, and we'll discuss it in more detail in executive session, until this commission convened and conferred authority upon staff both with respect to the staffing plan and with respect to the general delegation of authority to the executive director. Our ethics staff guidance function was advisory only and expressly so. And so there may have been, as a result of that, as well as other factors when a new commission is underway, that may have resulted in a smaller number, nonetheless robust number, but a smaller number of requests coming in from state employees and others seeking guidance from the commission. But you'll see, and of course by law we're required to deal with specific guidances confidentially. You'll see when we go into executive session that staff was quite busy over that period of time.
Right. Thank you.
But if there are any questions about the comparative period, staff is happy to respond.
I'm just curious the extent to which the pandemic had an effect on the numbers. Is that are the numbers lower than the previous year or previous year, pre-pandemic year, or have they been fairly consistent?
The pandemic, and I would allow Carol and Keith to offer additional comments, but during the pandemic on the lobbying side, there was a lessening. There had been an upward arc in lobbying activity that absolutely impacted the work of commission staff. The pandemic did dampen that. The numbers nonetheless were quite high, but there was a lessening of activity. And I think there was a normal, on the ethics side, folks seeking, in particular, outside activity approval. There was probably less of that occurring as a result of the impact of the shutdown, and then the need for social distancing and so on. Carol, Keith, I don't know if you have anything to add.
All I would add was for lobbying in 2020, there was a dip in spending because of the pandemic. But in 2021, you can see in the annual report numbers were the lobbying compensation 292-point-something million last year. So that has kind of pretty much returned to pre-pandemic levels, which were very high. And the only dip you see in lobbying really on inquiries, we get over 20,000 in here, and last year up to date it was 28,000. That probably has nothing to do with the pandemic. That's just with the beginning of each biennial. That year we get many more inquiries than we might the second half of the biennial. So this coming year is a new biennial, 23-24. We'll probably have an uptick. Again, it's still a lot of many inquiries, but any dip you might see from those 2 years, I don't believe is subject to the pandemic. The only other thing I will add is in audit, we have a random audit program that the audit group audits lobbying filings. And in 2020, we had a pause in audit due to the pandemic. And that did impact the 2021 numbers because since there was a pause, I would say in 2021, not as many were drawn as normal because we were still catching up to the ones that had been drawn that we paused on in 2020. So there's a slight dip in audit, but for the most part, I would say we're back to normal now.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add beyond what Judge Burton has already offered the commissioners. The pandemic certainly, and people working outside of the office and at home, I think they did somewhat suppress the numbers that we might have otherwise expected. But now, as folks have slowly returned to their offices, we're now seeing an uptick in those numbers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next item are job postings under attachment C. These are brought up to date from the Commission's October 6th meeting. We now have, or had, as of a few days ago, a total of 180 resumes that we've received. It's quite a large response, but we have quite a few positions we've posted, and we've added one additional posting. So we were posting for 13 positions previously. We now have 14. The additional position is for an administrative position in the New York office. Now that we're reopened, time to replace former office manager who retired last year. and we do need some administrative support there. We've changed the classification from what we previously had for a number of reasons. Commissioner.
Given the number of vacancies that we have and the importance of these areas, is there anything more we should be doing in terms of reaching out to solicit potential applicants? Anything that the commission members themselves can be doing? It seems to me vital with all these open positions, particularly at the highest level, that we do everything possible to attract the most highly qualified people. So is there anything more that we as commissioners could be doing to assist in that regard?
Absolutely, absolutely. Push out through your networks the fact that the commission is hiring. The website has attracted, we've posted all of these positions, obviously, on our website as well as on New York Jobs. And they've been picked up by, a number of the posting sites. When we review complete our review of the resumes, which we'll be doing shortly, when the period closes, we'll have a much better idea of the qualifications. From what I've looked at quickly, we do have a substantial number of qualified individuals who have applied, but that's the threshold.
Yeah,
and there are other factors, obviously, that we need to take into account in our recruiting efforts, and we'll be taking into account.
I'm just, I can appreciate that. We each individually may know someone who may not be going to our website, but we say, hey, that would be a perfect person in our individual opinion, and shouldn't we all look at these vacancies and say to ourselves, do I know a retired lawyer or, someone else who might be very interested in this? And I think we should redouble our efforts, because it seems to me these are vital positions to fill with the most qualified people we can find.
Absolutely. These are vital positions. I know I've been reaching out just generally to anyone who might know individuals who are looking for positions or looking, frankly, to change positions, whether they're interested in working in the New York office or the Albany office, or ultimately in the Buffalo office, which is a smaller operation. But as we move forward, we'll be talking about, I hope, expansions, frankly, beyond just filling these vacancies.
And are there requirements for associated with the requirements for location or place associated with the specific position?
So some of the positions do have place. Others we're open to individuals either in New York or at this time or in Albany. In most of what are called the processing positions, the positions that require scrutinizing filings and so on, we tend to concentrate those positions, all those positions, are in the Albany office, where we have the appropriate facilities and the appropriate supervision. The New York office is a different kind of operation, but by and large, they're Albany positions, but there are exceptions.
Is there, and I don't like to impose more burden on you, but should we be creating and I know it was in the book previously, a one-paragraph summary, at least on the key people, that should go to the individual commissioners to say, please help us? Because it seems to me, I'm just using investigative counsel as an example, these are critical positions with no criticism intended of those occupying it. And most of us are lawyers, and I'm not excluding the non-lawyers from this, but it's very, very possible that particularly the lawyers may know someone who's a senior person in his or her law firm and might be the perfect person.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very helpful. And if any commissioners would like more information about these positions, the postings are online, but there are a lot of them. There's obviously a lot of postings, and they're quite detailed. But we can drill down and look at those situations. I know I've reached into my network, primarily lawyers, but there are others, who may have an interest in these positions, may be well qualified and could prove to be excellent assets to the agency. And I would appreciate whatever efforts, each member of the commission, and this is true of staff as well. We've asked staff to reach out to their respective networks and talk up these these vacancies that we have. But we do have a robust response
Right.
so far, but it can be more robust, absolutely.
Right. Sure, Commissioner Edwards, and then Vice Chair Austin.
Can you provide some insight into the resumes received? From where are they coming? Within people already within the state, or
From what I've seen,
or
I don't have a complete breakdown in front of me in terms of the provenance of the individuals, but from those I've seen, they come from within state government and from outside state government. But there is a good deal of interest, and it's peaked when we put postings on our website on New York Jobs. I think it's just the nature of the beast that individuals within government look at other opportunities they have, particularly if they want to continue their state service for all the reasons that people wish to remain in public service.
And I was just curious, how many of the 180 resumes are from people from within the commission staff who are trying to move up as opposed to outside people?
To my knowledge, relatively small number, but there are instances of that, and probably each of us on staff has been approached with respect to that.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks.
But it's a small number. We don't have 180
Right.
staff members, so by definition, it's going to be from outside.
Anyone else? All right. So implementing executive law 94, subsection 8.
Yes, we staff in the training unit as well as executive staff have had conversations in particular with the Office of Employee Relations. They manage the state learning management system, and we have been looking at that for a period of time. Staff has been looking at the potential for using that system, which encompasses, I think it's 160,000 or 170,000. A substantial portion of the workforce is in the automated learning system, including our agency. We use trainings online, click-through trainings that they provide and monitor required trainings. What we've learned so far is that system, in its current configuration, is not particularly being used for the live training that we're obliged to provide on a biannual basis. In the intervening years, there's the more passive kind of click-through refresher course, but the live training is not something that they're particularly equipped to handle now. There's some possibilities for it. In the interim, while we are working with ITS, Information Technology Services, the state, to build a system that will allow us to monitor, hopefully, the entire workforce, state workforce that we have to provide comprehensive training for our staff. And Megan Hennigan leads that effort. She should be on, if she has anything to add. They are working, as they always do, with ethics officers at each of the agencies. Most of the actual boots on the ground training is conducted through agency ethics officers. Our agency provides direct training to somewhere between 15 and 15% of the group of SDS filers that we currently service. Part of our plan, part of our proposal, which we will be presenting to commissioners at a future meeting, is to augment our internal staff substantially, but not substantially enough for the 7- or 8-fold increase in the overall training contingent that needs to be trained now. So that burden, as we've discussed previously, will be borne by state ethics officers. Megan and her team, Kate's team, have updated the training materials that they and ethics officers are using to accommodate this more diverse and broader workforce. And Megan, am I right? You have a train the trainer session now scheduled for, is it about 100 agency ethics officers coming up November 9th?
Right, Judge. This morning, this is Megan Hennigan, Deputy Director of Education. We currently have a WebEx about 100 ethics officers and what we call their designees. So it could be an HR person or other staff that they designate to also train. And then once we do that, train the trainer, we are going to resume our internal program. So Kate and I will be starting to train people again, which will be good.
Thank you. At this point, we have a trainer, a training assistant who work under Megan's supervision. We will be proposing augmenting that staff substantially so that we can conduct more direct trainings, but the preponderance of these trainings will be done at the agency level. The other challenge is monitoring it. This agency has a quarterly reporting requirement now on the rate of trainings that are taking place and the number of trainings that aren't taking place or been completed. We do not, as previously discussed, have a system that can accommodate 250,000 employees. Even OER through the SLMS system doesn't have that kind of capability. We are working with ITS to design a system that will enable us to import effectively information on the entire state executive workforce. We can probably import a good deal of the data itself through the payroll system, through the controllers, state controller's office. There are ways we can get the data, but we need a system that can manage it and then monitor the compliance with the training requirement on a biannual basis, as well as monitoring the intervening year of less comprehensive training that every employee has to go through, as well as ensuring that every new state employee receives comprehensive ethics training within 90 days of joining the workforce. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the ground. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to create a system that can monitor that. In the meantime, what Megan and her team are doing is coordinating with ethics officers at the agency level to have them collect the information, compile it, and eventually we'll have to incorporate it into a system. It's not an easy task. It will get done. It's not going to get done overnight.
Understood. And I want to say first, I appreciate the way in which staff to date is staying on top of the requirements of the regs when it comes to training the people who need to be trained, and at least have a process in this interim for going about making that happen. I think that's very important to reassure the public that is taking place. I'm curious, Megan, of those 100 plus people that you will train soon, who will then train others, how many more of those types of personnel could be trained or will be trained, who will then go out and train others in the agency?
I think that's going to be the tricky part for, depending on the size of the agency. Take my famous example, MTA or DOCS or any of the really large agencies, they are all going to need to substantially increase their training capacity. So while, sorry, I have a dog barking. So while they may have, let's say the MTA maybe has 10 training staff, they're very likely going to have to increase that, and I'm sure challenges with that for those agents internally to get approval.
You broke up a little bit, but I think what you're saying is that the agencies will need to increase the number of trainers that they have who will then train staff at the agencies, and that there's a approval process that's required in that as well.
There's not an approval process. It's the ethics officer can designate, so they should lead them through the training at least once, and then whoever they designate within their agency can go forth and give the CETC.
Understood. All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, so we will move to item 4 on the agenda, and that has to do with propose further conforming amendments to the adjudicatory proceedings and appeals process regulations. Simply put, what we're going to try to do is to conform the language of the regs and rules that we are governed by with the new legislation that established the commission. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, correct. There are some changes that ECRA effectuated in the way investigations and enforcement matters are to be handled by the agency. For example, the concept of a 60-day vote by the commission on whether to open an investigation after a verified complaint has been received is no longer part of the procedural mechanism. Instead, the burden in the first instance is on staff to review referred matters, incoming complaints, whether verified or not, matters that are self-generated or matters that come from other sources. They're to conduct a preliminary review, make an assessment, and then either the commission or staff can elevate a matter into an investigation. And then at the conclusion of the investigation, this is the procedure under the new law, staff makes a recommendation to the commission on next steps. And so we've had to modify those portions of the regulations that deal with that portion of the investigative process to adapt to the new requirements of the statute. We also needed to clarify the status of the person who will conduct hearings. Prior statute made no reference, left entirely to the commission to adopt regulations governing due process hearings on complaints and enforcement matters. Under JCO, the regulations provided for the creation of a panel of independent, well-qualified individuals who would be randomly selected to preside over individual matters as hearings came up. The new statute still leaves to the commission to shape the form of that proceeding, but it speaks of an independent arbitrator. After doing much research, we've concluded that the hearing officer concept that had been adopted by JCO is synonymous with the independent arbitrator referred to in the statute. And so there's a conforming definitional provision in the statute to take care of that. We've also clarified that in the course of the hearing, a hearing officer can issue subpoenas for purposes of bringing individuals or evidence to the hearing, and likewise that counsel for the respondent can issue subpoenas in accordance with the CPLR for the same purpose. In other words, it's not reopening of some sort of discovery procedure, which would otherwise be governed by SAFA, by the State Administrative Procedure Act, in the discretion of the hearing officer to decide whether or not there will be discovery, but rather the subpoena provision within the hearing process. This is different from the investigative subpoenas that we dealt with in a prior amendment that the commission approved, and which is now the subject of a separate rulemaking. So we've clarified that, and we've also added in some, in addition to the, there's now a designation of victim as well as complainant in the statute. So we've incorporated that into the mechanisms for investigation and enforcement proceedings. And those are substantively the changes that are made in these rules and regulations.
Commissioner Cardozo.
Very difficult to see if there's any issues in what you've done, and I appreciate the conforming amendments, but were there any substantive provisions that might have been changed in a different way? It's very hard to focus on what was the policy issue as distinct from the technical changes. Were there anything that say, hey, reasonable people could differ and we could change something one way or another? I don't know how to review. It looks fine as I read it, but I don't know how to, where were the real hard decisions made as distinct from just a good lawyer looking and making the conforming amendments?
The answer to that is the intention here was to conform, and I should say, and I neglected to say, there is one insertion that I think we should have in one of the regulations, and that's 941.3B. Just needed the same introductory clause in that provision that's in the next subsection. If following presentation of the matter to the Commission pursuant to Executive Law, Section 9410F, that should appear at the beginning of new 941.3B. That same language should be inserted, but that's not a substantive change. What that was intended to do was to conform the existing procedures for investigations and hearings to the procedures that were previously in place. We were very careful not to make any substantive changes. Now, that's a decision I agree in and of itself, to continue more or less with the framework that previously existed. I do think, and I would recommend at some point, when the Commission has developed experience and a greater familiarity with the nature of the work the Commission does, and there are changes that have been affected in the work process, absolutely, and we've simply imported those right in, almost verbatim in most instances, right into these regulations just to conform them, because these were out of step, frankly, and inconsistent with the dictates of the new statute. But I will say the procedure for how hearings are conducted is something that the Commission has the power and the authority and is charged with framing. So going forward, the Commission, and it's consistent with the charge in the preliminary provisions of the statute for the Commission to review all of this. But this is a measure we need now so that we can conduct business.
And again, are there any substantial policy changes in any of these suggested amendments in order to conform to the new legislation?
In my view, there are no, and we may want to go into an executive session if we're getting into a legal discussion in terms of statutory interpretation. But specifically, I and our prior Director of Investigations were seeking in the short term to conform these to the statute. The statute does affect substantive changes, absolutely. And so to that extent, of course, those
changes in procedure?
In procedure, right. Substantive in how an investigation is incepted. Right,
but not policy per se.
Not policy. Right. You know, for example, another change effectuated by the statute is previously staff made the determination to bring a matter to hearing. A resolution of the matter would be taken to the Commission. A dismissal of a decision to close a matter after a formal investigation had been begun by Commission vote would be taken to the Commission. But bringing a matter to hearing, because the Commission had previously voted to open an investigation, was not part of the statutory scheme, and therefore was not part of the regulations. Now it is. Commission doesn't vote any longer to open an investigation. Instead, its vote takes place after the investigation is completed, and staff makes a recommendation. That could be regarded as, while it's procedural, it does have substantive impact. But we didn't make any judgment about that. We simply changed the language to conform to that. But again, I certainly think once the commissioners have experience with the statute and its application and the work of the Commission, I would strongly recommend across the board, as the statute calls for, that consideration be given where appropriate to changing certain procedural aspects of it. I hope that sufficiently answers the question. Try not to make any substantive changes, except those that were dictated by the statute.
Any other questions or comments? One thing I feel compelled to say is that even though staff now can and will initiate investigations without the vote of the commission. The commissioners will be kept informed of all investigations that have been initiated, and obviously the resolution of those, because some of them we will have to vote on.
Correct.
Vice Chair Austin, no? All right. Okay. So we need to approve these, is that right?
It's a two-step process. We need to, and do we do it in two? Well, we can do it in one motion, Carol, correct? Because we would like to have these implemented on an emergency basis so that we can begin using these procedures, but they are subject to a formal rulemaking under the State Administrative Procedure Act. So we can adopt them, the Commission can adopt them on an emergency basis for 90 days.
From publication, which would be 2 weeks from today if we get it in today.
Okay.
So, Carol, can you just state what you need the motion to be?
We would need a motion to proceed with a notice of emergency adoption and proposed rulemaking of these rules in your attachment.
Okay. And that, and
So moved.
nothing more. Okay. Commissioner Carney has moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Groenewegen. Any more discussion on this?
The one thing, and I think it's implicit in the motion, that additional clause that I recommended be added in 941.3B.
Yeah.
I assume as part of that.
Friendly amendment? Friendly amendment. Okay.
And just so that we're clear, if I may, after the 9th, we will be publishing this so that it will be adopted on a more permanent basis. But right now, we need it immediately.
Correct. It will be effective upon filing with the state register. That would be today, if possible. And then it goes through the normal
Adoption process.
So public comment for 60 days. And if there's anything substantial that we want to change after comment, we would have to do a revised rulemaking. But
Okay.
for now, it would be in place as is for at least 90 days.
Thank you.
Any other comments? We're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion as made by Commissioner Cados, Commissioner Carney, and then amended.
Aye.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll turn to Vice Chair Austin for a discussion of a proposed committee structure for this commission. And let me just say to the public that we have a number of committees working on various aspects of how this commission will conduct business. We will be reporting out on those discussions in subsequent meetings, but right now we have a proposal from our committee on committee structure for the commission. That committee has been chaired by Vice Chair Austin, so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe everybody has seen the resolution that was circulated with regard to the creation of committees that were necessary or that we believe are necessary in order to have commission oversight with regard to the various aspects of the operations of the committee. Our executive director was very helpful in pointing out some of the legal implications of how we organized and what we were doing, and his recommendations have been incorporated for the most part by the committee. Just to review for our public participants, the committees would be as follows: administration, which would include personnel matters, which is staffing, including a staffing plan and oversight; a budget, which subcommittee, which would, committee within the administration committee, which would be dealing with the budget, and that's a subcommittee, and the annual report. With regard to ethics, there would be a subcommittee for financial disclosure statements and advice and guidance. There would be a lobbying committee, a legal committee, which would oversee investigation and enforcement, as well as oversight of pending and anticipated litigation. A communications committee, which would have the responsibilities of the website, public relations, formulating policy regarding public and press statements by the chair, vice chair, commissioners, executive director, senior staff, and all other staff members, and a committee on education training. We then discussed and came up with a series of guidelines with regard to filling committees, substituting members, designating the chairs of the committee and the subcommittees, reviewing the jurisdiction of each of the committees as is necessary, having each committee and subcommittee report to the commission when it meets, and apropos of our most recent discussion, dealing with an ongoing obligation with regard to overseeing the rules and regulations and the advisory opinions of prior commissioners, which fall within the committee's jurisdiction, we would have the ability and the responsibility under each of these committees to make suggestions with regard to rule changes. And again, this is in consultation with staff as well. I believe Commissioner Cardozo has a comment on that section. I'll turn it over to him in just a moment. The chair and vice chair will serve as ex officio members of all committees, and obviously nothing would limit the chair or the commission from establishing permanent or ad hoc committees as may be necessary in order to help us do our business with regard to the procedural rules which guide the committees and which would promote transparency and the goals of the commission. In a nutshell, that is the resolution as it is. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Cardozo for his comments on paragraph 8 of the second part of the resolution.
I would just suggest that in light of the discussion we just had on the other amendments to the regulations, that paragraph 8, we add the wording, not only should the committee review the regulations and advisory opinions of prior commissions, but also any new regulations that may be adopted by this commission, so that it would be clear that if there's something we want to change on the regulation we just adopted, that the relevant committee could adopt that. So I would just say, add advisory opinions of prior in this commission or something to that effect.
As well as rules, regulations, and advisory opinions adopted by this commission.
Yep.
Thank you. So why don't we get a motion and a second, and then we can have this more discussion.
All right, I would move adoption of the resolution as amended.
Second.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Austin and Commissioner Cardozo. Any other discussion, questions, comments?
I have some basic questions in that I'm thinking about the implications of a committee structure that is as detailed as this on staff. My concern is this. I understand right now the staff is limited. I mean, we've lost a number of significant people, and the staff are doing double and triple duties. And I think it's possible that having the commissioners giving input in multiple areas can be very helpful. But I can also see, as a practical matter, this level of commission work could have the effect of creating staff work for staff. And I was wondering, did you discuss that at all? How do you see the committee members and their work intersecting with the day-to-day obligations of the staff who are performing that work?
We did discuss it, and our view was that we weren't looking to do the nitty-gritty or get involved in the nitty-gritty, but really to help us understand what was going on with the various divisions and areas of responsibility of the commission, so that we would be educated and be the old commercial, the educated consumer is the best customer, that we would be able to have an understanding as to what was going on. Not that the committees would come in and say, you do this, you do that. That would be grossly inefficient, and for the most part, especially at this point, we don't know so much what we would even tell them. But as a learning process and a learning curve and an understanding, it would give us an ability to represent those areas and understand those areas to the entire commission and enable us to more fully participate and help everybody else participate in these various areas. I would add that our executive director's involvement also had that in mind, and that several of the suggestions were couched in the perspective of our not getting in the way of staff and helping staff rather than being underfoot.
Yeah, that's I think a real practical concern. So what was the thinking of how that would be achieved, though, as a?
I think on some levels, not just education, but educational oversight. You know, as a commission, we're responsible to make sure that operations are consistent with whatever strategic plan we agree upon, and that when it's reported out when the staff reports out, we thought you would want members of the commission to be fully abreast of what will be going on, and to be able to understand it from an oversight perspective. So while we don't get involved in the day-to-day operations, I think that there's some responsibility for oversight.
Let me just check. Is everybody who's listening remotely able to hear? Just want to make sure the mics are working properly.
I can hear.
Right.
Okay, then we're good.
Okay.
Good. Apologies for interrupting. Just wanted to be sure.
So just a practical, so say with the legal committee and the subcommittee for investigations and enforcement, the work of the committee would be focusing on process, not specific investigation.
Right.
And same for litigation, not particular cases.
Right.
It's only the process.
Right.
So each of these, in a way, is a species of an administrative function, not a policy-making function.
It's definitely not policy-making, because we're the policymakers as a whole, not as a
Okay, well, I think that's an important understanding.
And ultimately, we come to the full commission.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Let me say on behalf of staff, it is not just helpful, it is crucial for there to be an effective and efficient working relationship between staff at every level, but particularly at the executive level, and the commissioners, and to have the ability for us to reach out when necessary, when we're at points where, again, we don't make policy, we're implementing it, but that doesn't mean that interpretational issues don't come up or that we don't encounter areas where we don't have policy. We have a new commission in particular. And I personally think, this may not be a universally held view, but we are very thin at every level in the agency at this point, that it is good to be able to have the opportunity to communicate with commissioners who are focused on a particular area that we're specializing in. It saves on a learning curve, obviously, in discussing an issue, and it can be very helpful for us in implementing. I absolutely share the concern that, sometimes the beast can be helpful, but feeding it can also be burdensome. But that's something, we'll have to figure out. I very much, appreciate both the concern that you're expressing, because it is something that we have to be mindful of. And the expectation that we'll have positive working relationships going forward. We'll have to strike that balance.
And is the intent here for efficiency, so that you can more efficiently communicate with commissioners about specific issues?
Absolutely.
Right. And we'll keep the demands of the beast for minimum.
No, I think those two clarifications help me a lot in that thinking first that it's not a policy role on the part of the committee members. It's more on an oversight of or understanding of process. And second, we're an important and valued resource to the staff. And if we think of our role as both the oversight but also the resource, I think balancing it that way, as we as members of these committees understand it that way, I think it addresses the concern I have about
And if I may, the other
avoiding role confusion.
Yep, sure.
Sorry. The other concept, of course, is that with the number of committees and subcommittees, there are more of those than there are of us, even when we become a full complement. So there's going to be some cross-pollination that's going to be helpful to us. So that, you know, for example, I could sit on the ethics committee and also the legal committee and get a little bit of flavor for both, and somebody else will be sitting on the ethics committee and the lobbying committee. So there'll be interaction, at least in our knowledge and exchange, that will help us, I think, better to understand when something comes forward. So that was also the concept, that there would be, you wouldn't just be on one committee.
Right.
I mean, you'll chair, perhaps, I think the goal was everybody's going to chair one committee and one subcommittee, but we're going to be on it more than one committee to be able to coordinate, for want of a better word, or cross-pollinate.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions on this? We have a motion on the floor to approve the resolution as amended. Are we ready to vote on that? We all have it before us. All right. All those in favor of the resolution as presented by Vice Chair Austin and as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution passes.
Chairman, if I may,
Sure.
Commissioner Cardozo and Commissioner Edwards were very involved in the process, and I thank them for their attentiveness. They responded almost as fast as I hit the send button sometimes, and really it made the process very quick and efficient, and I thank them for their good nature and their thoughts and efforts.
Well, great. Well, thank you, and thanks to all three of you for the hard work on this and for getting this to us and to resolution and approval today. So thank you all. All right. Is there any new business or other business to come before us? Hearing none, the chair then will entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law 105 and Executive Law 94, subsection 11, to address matters concerning employment of personnel, pending litigation, and investigative and enforcement matter that is confidential pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law. Is there such a motion? Made by Vice Chair Austin. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Cardozo. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, we are now adjourned to executive session. Thank you.
Let's wait a moment for...
Yes, okay. Thank you.
And we are live.
Thank you. Welcome back to the public session of this meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. We're going to ask our acting executive director, Mr. Berlin, to give us a summary of what transpired in our executive session.
Please hold, Berlin, until I record. I apologize.
This meeting is being recorded.
You may continue.
Ron? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In executive session, the Commission discussed matters related to legal advice The commission decided one financial disclosure statement exemption appeal pursuant to 19 NYCRR Part 935 and Section 94(9)K of the executive law. The commission ratified staff's authority to issue informal guidance opinions pursuant to executive law 94 sub 7 in the period July 8, 2022 through September 11, 2022. The commission closed one matter and discussed several other investigative matters, and the commission discussed one personnel matter.
Thank you, Mr. Executive Director. Any comments or questions on the part of commissioners? Let me thank our staff for all of their hard work to get us prepared for this meeting. We really appreciate all of your efforts and look forward to continuing to work with you in between these meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the entire staff, we very much appreciate your recognition of staff efforts. I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Indeed. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? It was moved by Vice Chair Austin, seconded by, actually, I think Commissioner Cardoza.
That works.
Right. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all.
Okay, it is,
You want to call me tomorrow?
it is 3:15.